Welcome to lesson number 2. Lesson number 1 was an overview of Massive, but now let's deep dive into Massive and learn about the oscillators. In Massive, the left side here is all about generating sound. We have 3 identical oscillators. We have modulation oscillator that doesn't really produce any sound of its own, but can be used to manipulate or modulate the other oscillators. We have a noise section and a feedback section. The modulation oscillator, the noise, and the feedback will be covered on a separate video. So each of these oscillators have 2 drop downs and 3 knobs here. We also have a pitch control. So in effect, what we're doing here is selecting the wave shape that will produce the sound that we hear. And if I just play any note, you can have a look at the scope and you can see also in the analyzer which frequencies are in play. So let's hear it and have a look. Right. And what's interesting about this is that if you just record that, and let's have a quick try here. I have a C note just recorded here, and I'll do render in place in Cubase here. So you can see exactly what's going on. So I've recorded that note, and if we just go and zoom in, we'll see something interesting. So I'm zooming in, and there you go. I actually see the wave shape repeats itself, and that's the job of the oscillator. It just oscillates according to the wave shape. So that's is something that is nice to know. And if we are using our oscillator in a way that evolves over time, we'll see different shapes. So that's why we have the wavetable position. Now in Massive, we're not just using simple waveforms, we're using wavetables, which means that we have a bunch of wave shapes stacked together and we can morph through them. And again, let me open the scope here. And sorry, that's not the scope. Let's open the scope and have a look at the wave shape here while I'm playing. So I'm morphing over time, and what we can do is take an LFO, for example, drop it on one of these positions here, click and drag up, and let's play. So this is how you create sounds that evolve over time, and we'll learn about LFOs in a later video. But for now, let's just have fun with that. So I can change, for example, the rate here freely, or I can sync it to my DAW. Now, the sound that we hear is really dependent on what kind of wavetable we select. So let's select something else. So we don't have to do that. This is just for fun. If you find a position that you like and that's the sound that you want and you don't want to evolve that over time, that's perfectly fine. It's all about what you're looking for. And that's our first knob here. So the second knob is actually related to the mode. And here we have the second drop down. So in Massive, each of these oscillators can also be changed or manipulated by the mode here. So right now we have the spectrum. The spectrum is a kind of a low pass filter. So let me go back to our default sound and have a look at the analyzer. When I play a note, I can see all kinds of frequencies that are in play. But if I change the intensity here, so I'm dropping some of the frequencies and I'm eventually left with the sine wave. So this effect really is related to the wave shape that, or the wave table that we're selected. So let me select something else. Let's say this one. So that's the idea here. And you can change that also over time. So I can have, again, LFO 5 dropped here, click and drag up. And we'll learn more ways to manipulate all these parameters in later videos. Let's go back to our default sound. Now, we have other modes. We have bend modes and we have formant. So the bend modes are related to the way we are shaping the waveform. We are stretching and contracting it. And it's really hard to explain, and it is best to just experiment. So let's experiment with that. Well, let's take the bend plus. And you can see the effect here on the frequencies or on the waveform. And this is also really dependent on the wavetable that we select. So let's select something else. Let's take the bend plus minus. And finally the bend minus. That's the idea here. Now, the last one is formant, which really relates to the human voice. And again, you will recognize the sound of it. Sort of a vowel-y sound. And we can automate that as well. So we can take an LFO, drop it again here, click and drag. And that's the idea here. The last knob here is an amp, which means volume. That's the amplitude. And when we are using two or more oscillators, it might make sense to mix between them. And depending on which one you want to be more dominant, then you can change the amount value here. So let's introduce a second oscillator. And while we do that, it makes also great sense to talk about the pitch. So right now, when we are playing a C note, our oscillators will eventually produce, or the sound that we'll hear from the synthesizer will be a C note. But I can change that. So I can go and change that, for example, take four semitones up. And when I play a C note, I will actually get an E note. So the idea is that if I'm using more than one oscillator, I can actually create chords. So let's see that. Let's go back to 0, and I've just double clicked. So that's another tip here. If you double click a parameter, you go back to the default, and we'll have oscillator 2 4 semitones up. And let's also have oscillator 3 7 semitones up. And what will we get? So that's a major chord. How about that? And what would happen if I'll pitch the second oscillator 3 semitones? That will be a minor chord. And actually, I don't want to have this modulation here. Let's just turn it off. And that's the way you do it. Right click, off. And you can change the pitch in any way that makes sense to you. You can also have, let's go back to our default sound. You can also have something of this effect. You can have, let's take 5 cents up on oscillator 1 and 5 cents down. When I'm saying cents, I mean that we have 100 cents in each semitone. So that's the explanation here. And this will sound phasey. And the effect will be more apparent when you spread the oscillators more and more. So if I'll take, let's take 10 and 10 down. And let's have a little bit of a reverb here, just for fun. And if we're already playing here, let's have oscillator 3 run 12 semitones down. And this means that we have a full octave down. And I'm playing any note here, and I'll get this sound. And that's the basic idea of how to use the oscillators. So the last part of each of these oscillators is the routing to our filters. And we have a selection here. We can route each of these oscillators either to filter 1 or filter 2 or anywhere in between. And we'll learn all about the filters in our next lesson. And let's just have a quick try here. So our filter 1 right now is set to none. So we actually don't have any filtering running. But if I'll select a low pass filter, then I'm just filtering out some of the high frequencies. And that will be covered in the video about the filters. Now, before filters, I will show you how to use the noise and feedback in a very quick and short videos, and then we'll have a return to these generators in a later, more expanded video, just to explore and experiment with these ideas here. So that's it for now. I hope that was helpful for you. And what I suggest is have a play, try out things, try to come up with your own sound, play with the oscillators, try to combine different oscillators with different pitches, and try out some of the basic modulations here, like using LFO, and see what can you come up with. Just experiment and have fun. So see you on the next lesson. Thank you.